And I'm going to read some of those in Spanish. I don't normally read from a phone, but I'm still not at the level where I can memorize things. In Spanish, I'll get there. I'm working on it. I want to thank my Chief of Staff, Lani Lapinga, for being here, and then also by identifying her, you can ask her questions. And I really want to thank LULAC for letting me be here and speak to you. It's very important to me. I was speaking with Evelyn earlier. I think politically, Texas could change and move in the right direction, and I think it could slide backwards and be a backward state for the next generation if we're not all pulling for that kind of change. That's what will happen, and I think if we are all pushing in the right direction, we will change it. So I want to break into these specific topics because I know they're on people's minds. First, we have to recognize that Texas es la economía más grande del mundo, con un producto interno bruto de 2 billones de dólares y una población de 30 millones de personas. Necesitamos una fuerza laboral educada para sostener esta economía dinámica y grandísima. Ustedes ya lo saben. También saben que los cupones, o en otro dialecto, vales, vouchers, no son buena idea. En los estados que han implementado los cupones, aproximadamente 70% de los estudiantes que reciben cupones ya están en escuelas privadas. That is, in states that have implemented a voucher program, 70% of the students that are getting the vouchers were already in private school. They were already paying for private school. They were already able to pay for private school. And they're basically just getting a tuition break on public taxpayer dollars. No es buena idea. If we were going to try to give a voucher to every kid who currently attends a private school, which has been stated by the governor, we want to make sure that every kid in a private school gets a voucher. We want to make sure every kid who's homeschooled gets a voucher. Your tax dollars, whether or not you have a kid in the public schools, going to pay people to homeschool their kids and take them to private schools. Si darle un cupón a cada niño que actualmente asiste a una escuela privada o que recibe educación en lugar, lo costaría el Estado 10 billones de dólares al año. $10 billion a year. You know what? For $500 million a year, I could expand Medicaid. $500 million. And I'm busting in English for a second because I didn't prepare to talk about Medicaid expansion in Spanish, but we could try it. For the moment, I'll tell you that $500 million I told you that it might cost, maybe $1 billion, who knows what the numbers really will be. We have economists' estimates, but what's $500 million here or there when we're throwing money around like we do in the state? I'll tell you what it is. Medicaid expansion actually pays for itself. If we were to spend $1 billion, say, on Medicaid expansion, we'd get back about $2 billion a biennium. At the state level, $2 billion, we would net profit if we were to spend a little money. You want to run a state like you run a business? If you can put $10 in and get $20 back, that's what you do. It's really, really one of the most tragic, bad, backwards political decisions the state has made not to expand Medicaid. It's been the thing I've been loudest about for the last 4 years. We've advanced it quite a bit, but we're still stuck. We need more people voting for candidates who recognize the moral importance and the fiscal importance of taking this next step. Back to vouchers. Nationwide, in the 15 states that have had a voucher program, not a single one of them has demonstrated that they work. So if you want to theoretically think that vouchers work, stop. They don't. In practice, a nivel nacional, a los 15 estados que tienen programas de cupones, no hay ningún solo ejemplo de que funciona. En realidad, no se trata de hechos. Si se tratara de hechos, de política inteligentes, no estaríamos hablando de cupones. It's not really about the facts, I say. If it were about facts and smart policy, we wouldn't be talking about vouchers. So I try to think of some adjectives that would be appropriate for the voucher conversation. It's not about parental choice. It sure as hell not about student achievement. So the adjectives I came up with in Spanish, intenté pensar en algunos adjetivos para describir este movimiento que abandona una institución pública de bien común. Perezoso, dogmático, populista, engañoso, ineficaz, distrayente, ofuscante, peligrosamente autodestructivo, moralista y falso. That is lazy, dogmatic, populist, deceitful, ineffective, distracting, obfuscating, dangerously self-destructive, self-righteous, and disingenuous. So that's enough on vouchers. In case you're wondering, I think that they're not a good idea for our kids. I want to talk a little bit about impeachment, and it's not so much as a shift as you might think. All of you are aware that we had an impeachment trial, I presume, in the Senate a few weeks ago, and it was a debacle. A just result was not reached. When we're talking about vouchers, we're talking about using, I'm going to connect the two, we're talking about the use of public dollars and abandoning public institutions and public trust for private purposes and private gain. And when the impeachment trial falls under the same scrutiny, what it really was about is not one person or one person's decision. That impeachment trial was about the use of a public office and public powers and public finance to support a private person and a private purpose. They're the same in that respect, and it worries me because we're abandoning the institutions that have served us so well for so long. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, you need systems that work. Education systems, justice systems, law enforcement systems, and when we abandon those in pursuit of some political purpose or a private gain, we're letting our whole state slide off the table, and I'm not willing to let that happen. Let me say a few of those words in Spanish, and then I think I'll just take questions. Si trataba de instituciones públicas, nuestra fe en ellas y la integridad de la que dependemos. Y estoy siendo testigo de un debilitamiento de todo eso. Estoy viendo una legislatura que elude a las cortes. Estoy viendo una rama ejecutiva que elude a la legislatura. Estoy viendo como la institución pública del Procurador General se transforma en una institución privada para intereses privados. And now I'm seeing public education used for the same thing. Those are the two topics I wanted to talk about in two languages. It was entertaining for me, but it's more than entertaining. I like to immerse myself in the Spanish language because it's a mixture of cultures, and I feel that when we speak two languages, we're not just decoding. We're not an algorithm. We're feeling in two ways. We are feeling two cultures. We are feeling two histories. And there's more of them here in this country. And that's one of the things that's beautiful about this country is we have so many languages, so many cultures, and it is our strength. And sadly, I think that what we've seen really is a rejection of that at the political level, rather than embracing of that. And that's the wrong direction. A word or two, I think I've already talked about Medicaid expansion. Another thing that I've done a ton of work on in this last session is the grid. I don't know any electrons that have a political identity or an ethnic identity or any kind of demographic characteristic. We just need the lights on. We need them on to keep people alive in hospitals. We need the lights on to power our schools and power our homes. And we need to be able to rely on it, and we need to be able to afford it. So it's been a tremendously difficult task to take a grid that was designed 75 years ago, a market that was overhauled 25 years ago, and make it work in an economy that's triple the size that it was just 20 years ago, with triple the population and brand new technologies in every direction. So it's been quite a challenge, and it's something I'd be happy to discuss with you all if you would like to hear anything else on it. But I think right now I'll just see if there are questions, because I tend to give long answers. And I know there were some questions down here at this table. You all have a constitutional election, a ballot election coming up. There are a dozen of them on there. There's only a few that I think are really hard to think about, and I'd be happy to provide any background on those. Or general questions about the legislative process or anything else. Yes, Sheriff. Good to see you.
Just like McCarthy, the governor has continued to promise things to the rural Republicans so that they will vote on the vouchers.
Yes.
Are you aware of anything that will make them shift over? I mean, the only reason it hasn't happened is because of the rural Republicans, and we need them to stay on there.
Anything that would make the rural Republicans abandon the cause.
Yes.
Yes, I'm aware of something that would make them abandon the cause. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's a very suspenseful moment we're walking into. Many rural Republicans oppose vouchers because there aren't any private schools in their towns. Right? They oppose vouchers because their culture of their town revolves around the local high school, and it's just unthinkable that they would lose that. And they would lose that because the vouchers are going to suck money out of the public schools. They're going to make the schools collapse, and people are going to further lose faith. It's sort of like defunding government. If the government is so debilitated by lack of funding, in some cases corruption, people lose faith in government. I think Lupe, that's exactly what they want. They want us to lose faith in our common institutions. Why would these real Republicans yet then cross over? Because they would be exempted. Legislation would be proposed that said, actually, if you're in a rural small town, don't worry about it. We're not going to have vouchers for you. Even that, though, the public school system is a statewide system. And so I think many of them are going to hold. The other thing you can do is buy them off. You can say, hey, don't worry, if we take a kid out of your school with a private school voucher, we're going to keep paying your school as if the kid was there. Talk about fiscal irresponsibility. Imagine if you had to pay for your meals 3 times every time you ate. It just makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm worried. Okay? I'm worried that people will fold and collapse and that we will see a voucher system coming here. I've seen bad policy implemented over and over again when I just think it's not possible. I mean, we removed the requirement for any gun permit whatsoever. I'm not talking about right to bear arms. I'm talking about right to buy a gun without training, without permitting. 80% of the population thought that was a bad idea and they passed it anyway. So I don't get anything past these guys, which makes it so important that we have overwhelming public opposition to vouchers, overwhelming support for people who take the right positions on these kinds of issues. Other questions?
Nathan, right here.
Yes.
Real quick, we all know that NAB is called a special session. Part of that is border protection. A couple of days ago, SB 11 was filed with respect to criminalizing people from foreign countries coming across the border. Very scary stuff.
Yeah.
It can kind of affect us down there. I'd like to know from your perspective what kind of legs that has. Is there any support for it? And what that looks like on both sides of the
Yeah, for anyone who didn't hear the question, he's referring to the never-ending dump truck of bad policy that seems to be coming from the governor's office being pushed onto a special session. Again, that's not even the proper process for things, but specifically, the question is about the border stuff. As if there hasn't been enough damage by the state of Texas already on this subject, he's calling for criminalizing, making it a state crime to enter Texas from a foreign country, and many, many other things designed to prove to the public that he really is trying to shut down the threat of immigration, of illegal immigration right now. And the question is, do I think it has any legs? I think it will come flying out of the Senate, and a dozen of us or so will vote against it. It will fly out on straight party lines. It will be the source of great misinformation and propaganda, as this stuff generally is. And over in the House, it may be a different fight. What I think the best we can hope for, I think it will pass. The best we can hope for is to try to knock around the edges and make it less destructive. To make sure that it doesn't catch families who are here living legally or who have been here for a long time, who aren't involved in narco trafficking, who aren't trying to move people through. Make it as least bad as possible, but I'm very pessimistic about the chances of stopping anything to do with the border. I've seen the amount of money that we spend there go from $225 million to $800 million to $1 billion to $5 billion, and then we just take another $5 billion, and now, since the state controller, the state comptroller just found more money, miraculously just found some more money, right as we're about to spend more money on stupid things. I think we're going to be dumping even more on there, because the political return on, and this is Republican, Democrat, the political return on the Republican side for saying things about the border, running programs about the border with no accountability, dumping more money onto the border is huge. They just keep winning and winning with it. It's awful. And you know, the border is a very serious subject, and we need the federal government to do a good job. We need a secure border. We need to treat people decently. We need a better immigration program. We need work. We need guest worker programs. There's all kinds of things we could do that are right, that still maintain a secure border, that still combat human trafficking, that still combat the movement of drugs. But most of what's being peddled is lies and propaganda on the subject. And I think, sadly, I think most of what's going to be done this session is more of it. I hate to be so honest at breakfast. I don't want to ruin your food. And we will be doing all we can to try to stop it. But we're outnumbered. Anything happier? We did get $1 billion for parks last session, okay? There's some good stuff that's happening. We got maternal Medicaid extended to 12 months. Some good things got done. And I passed some good bills that help people, but a lot of what gets passed doesn't. Yes, Billy.
On the border issue, and I don't really know law or anything like that, I'm not.
Yeah, I do question the constitutionality of all this stuff. It doesn't usually stop the Texas legislature though.
Oh, no, it doesn't stop me either, but doesn't the U.S. Constitution indicate that the border is the responsibility of the federal government?
It certainly does, and there's
And
already
so-
clashes, yeah.
Yeah, so if they pass this stuff, will there be lawsuits to stop it? Or how can we stop spending our Texas dollars when we are one of the lowest rated states on education dollars
And healthcare.
and healthcare? How can we just, well, I know.
We're gonna need to elect new people.
Well, I can guarantee you, LULAC will be filing a lawsuit if they.
That's right. LULAC will file lawsuits. There's lawsuits already pending. This legislature is not, I mean, they love the lawsuits because it's in the court, but I do think we ought to be filing them. We ought to be shutting them down. Some of this stuff is a constitutional gray area. Some of the courts are going to get it right. A lot of them are going to get it wrong. Good strategic lawyers are going to file them in the right courts and make it a national issue. I don't know where this stuff ends. Hopefully it eventually blows up in their faces, and hopefully the federal government will do a better job of managing communications and actions at the border. I think a lot of good policies have gone into place over the past 2 years that no one knows about. We have global forces that are driving immigration, but the narrative is, oh, this is Biden's open border. Bullshit. The border is as secure as it's ever been in history, more secure than it's ever been in history. Yet we have waves of immigration coming. I expect litigation. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I got some views. I'm a lawyer. I think it's at best fraught and probably unconstitutional, but it doesn't stop Texas from passing laws or spending money. I mean, the whole floating barrier thing, that was wildly unconstitutional, as well as ineffective, as well as inhumane. Just my view. Okay, not the border, yes,
Okay,
sir.
I got a question for you. I know that the civic part of the group are a whole lot less than the representatives we have in the state right now. My deal is there conversations within the other senators, influences by benefactors, especially the two billionaires, Wilkes and Dunn, that are setting up the agendas, for y'all to try to pass.
Yes.
And this is what we need to understand, that the people need to know, that the bandit books, the gender identities and all this and that, those two billionaires actually go to the churches and preach their agendas. And they fund also the school boards. They throw millions of dollars into the Republican Party and all that.
And they
To
drive
change
voters.
things. So like I knew that I saw the impeachment trial, and I knew right then and there that they were already influenced. They were already gonna. It was a waste of time.
Let me address that a little bit. You're absolutely right that those billionaires and others are influencing the politics of the state and they influence the government. I do want to be clear though, I don't think my colleagues are so-called on the take. You know, it's like they say, we'll give you $100,000 if you vote this way. Most of them are honest people with whom I disagree. But the money influence is driving fear throughout the state with a propaganda narrative, causing people to be elected who buy into that fear, causing people to be elected who believe in the kinds of stuff that are taking the state down. So our friend here raises a real serious concern about the role of money, not just money in politics, but particular sources of money that are dogmatic, and there's one worldview, and it's their view and their view alone, and it's hugely destructive. And I want this state, I want people to rise up and not just be angry about it, I want them to vote in mass numbers. Now. Even in the impeachment trial, it really came down to almost the last 24 hours. It was close, and then it all collapsed. And there's tremendous pressure out there in the public, funded by those guys.
You know, I wanted to bring that up because if there's a documentary by
CNN.
Yeah, that's all you got
They
to
had a special edition today, and it tells in detail how they had actually gone out to the public to know who their candidates are, and they have no idea. As long as they had that R at the end of their name, they had to vote. And where would the money come from?
Yeah, so there's a lot of problems with money there. I don't want to take all the time. I know there's some other excellent people who are going to talk to you. I do want to just leave on a somewhat positive note. Despite so much bad, we can talk the next 8 hours about bad stuff that keeps me and you up at night. There is some good. Even among the people who are voting for bad stuff, we are able to pass good legislation. We still have a functioning government. We haven't slipped off the table. We do pass bills that help people, and they are bipartisan. Don't lose all hope, either in the people who are there or in the process. But do be angry, do be motivated, do talk to your friends, do think critically, do get out to the polls. This state has so much going for it. In terms of the money we have, the natural resources we have, the entrepreneurial spirit, the multiculturalism, all high education systems, low property prices, we could really be awesome. Let's not blow the potential, let's realize it. Thank you all so much for letting me come talk to you today.
Good morning. Our next speaker is a brilliant young woman running for House District 113. And as a young woman myself, I'm really proud that we have young women running for these offices. Miss Sion Amare's journey optimizes unwavering resilience, a profound dedication to justice, an unyielding commitment to service. She was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. She immigrated to the United States at age 10. Driven by the pursuit of better opportunities in education. Sion grew up in a low-income household where her parents worked various odd jobs to keep a roof over their heads and found food on the table. Witnessing her family's hard work and resilience, Sion grew up in profound appreciation for service and dedication to amplifying the voices of vulnerable groups in the community. With an advanced degree in social work, Sion has actively worked to amplify the voices of marginalized communities. Her role as a Texas House staffer afforded her unique insight into policymaking on our state's most pressing issues such as education, public safety, and housing. Sion has spent the last year advocating for urgent climate actions in Texas, highlighting her commitment to advocating for a better and brighter future. Sion Amare is devoted to shaping a future that is fair, equitable, and sustainable for all Texans, driven by her belief in transformative power of youth activism and service and the pursuit of justice. Everybody give a warm welcome for Sion Amare.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me. So my name is Sion Amare, and I'm running for House District 113, which is Garland, Mesquite, and Rowlett. So the current incumbent is Representative Bowers, the Carnival women. And so I want to start, I know I'm new to this group, and I don't know a lot of y'all, so I want to start off with telling you just a little bit about me, about my background, and sharing some of my stories. So I was born in Ethiopia, immigrant from Ethiopia. I came to the States when I was 10 years old, and I went to school and grew up in North Dallas before going to college in Abilene, Texas to study social work. So I went to Abilene Christian University. I see a reaction here. And some of you in this room might relate to some of the stories that I grew up in. So I vividly remember this, my mom and my dad having a conversation about my dad getting a raise from his low-paying job, and him refusing to take that raise because it would mean that we would lose our food stamp card because we would be just a little bit over the requirements for the income level. And I also remember my dad being ill and refusing to go to the hospital because we didn't have health insurance. To this day, my parents don't have health insurance. And paying medical bills would mean not paying rent that month or not paying for full groceries that month. So these are stories that still get me emotional to talk about now, and these are stories that I hold near and dear to my heart and hope to bring to service, hopefully in the Capitol. And so I knew that because of my upbringing, I knew I wanted to get in a profession of service. I knew that I wanted to give back to people like my family, people like my communities, and so I chose a career in social work. I went to grad school at the University of Houston in pursuit of political social work. And I worked in Representative Rafael Lanchi's office. I was a fellow with the Mexican American Legislative Congress. And so this was during the COVID session. So it was during the 87th session. We can go on. But during the 87th session, I worked with the Mexican American Legislative Caucus to work on bills. That was a time where our governor, Greg Abbott, was attacking immigrants and blaming immigrants on the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we worked on a lot of messaging and communication. We worked on a lot of messaging and communication with the Mexican American Legislative Caucus to directly address that. We also worked on, you guys might remember, HB 6, the omnibus voter suppression bills. And we worked on a variety of other immigrant-related, COVID-related bills. And then, so after that, after my time in Representative Rafael Lanchi's office, I went to work with the Travis County Democratic Party, working with precinct chairs, Democratic grants. And then now I work with the Environmental Defense Fund, where I do their political advocacy work at the Capitol. So I was at the Capitol every week testifying on bills and making sure that environmental and our climate crisis is addressed at the Capitol. And there's 3 things that I want to share with y'all, 3 things that I want to bring with me in this campaign and hopefully to the Capitol. And that is lived experiences, storytelling, and making sure that there's transparency in education. So in terms of lived experiences, I always say this. I have witnessed firsthand lawmakers failing to represent the people that elected them into office. That Capitol belongs to the people like me and you. So we need to have representation at the Capitol. We need young voices, we need immigrant voices, we need black and brown people in leadership roles at the Capitol. Several months ago, I was talking to young people at a rally that were passionate about creating changes in the climate space, and LGBTQ rights and women's rights. And they were passionate about their future. They were passionate about creating changes. And we need those voices in leadership roles. Because let me tell you this, a lot of the lawmakers that are passing bills attacking our fundamental human rights, they will not live long enough to see the long-term consequences of their bills. But do you know who will? We will. And my kids will. Our children will. And so we need to make sure young voices are represented in seats of power and that we bring in fresh perspectives and new ideas to the Capitol. And the second one is storytelling. We need to be able to humanize politics. I'll say that again. We need to humanize politics. We live in such a polarized and divided society that throughout the years we witnessed how the humanness in politics has been slowly removed. I have witnessed this firsthand working at the Capitol, how a lot of these bills that are passing attacking fundamental human rights are in pure disregard of their communities, pure disregard of people like me and you, because that humanness has been removed from politics. So we need to be able to effectively storytell, to effectively tell the stories of my parents, of me as an immigrant woman, as a woman of color, we need to be able to tell the stories of people and make all of these complex issues that we talk about in terms that everyday people can understand. And then which leads me to the last one, transparency in education. My family came to the States in pursuit of better educational opportunities, so education has always been a big thing in my family. And my parents are voting for the first time ever this year because their daughter is running for and they've always been saying that I don't want to get involved in politics, or politics does not impact me, until they saw how every social safety net they relied on as in their time in the U.S. is dependent on policy. It's written by policymakers. And they saw, as I'm running for office and as I'm sharing these stories, they saw how policies directly impact their day-to-day lives. So we need to be able to, using storytelling, share how important and personal these policies and these laws are. And so that leads me to what Senator Nathan Johnson was talking about. As we go into yet another special session to play one of Greg Abbott's games, vouchers has been a huge topic, right? And one thing we need to understand is the historical context of vouchers. And we need to be able to educate people and communities on this historical context so we can ensure history does not repeat itself. How did vouchers first get started? Vouchers got started because schools and districts were asked to end racial segregation. And a group of people, certain people, did not agree with that. So they cut funding to public schools, and they started giving vouchers to white students so they can maintain their segregation. And we're seeing the same exact things today. We're seeing bans on books, we're seeing funding to public education being cut, and we're seeing Christian nationalists trying to take over our schools, and history yet again trying to repeat itself to maintain power. So we need to make sure we're advocating boldly and loudly against these societal issues and understand the historical context and educate our communities and make it personal to each and every one in our communities because it affects every single one of us whether we get involved or not. And so one thing that I want to leave for you all is, I know a lot of y'all are involved in politics, whether personally or you go out to vote or whatever it might be. Do not lose sight of service. Do not lose sight of the communities you're serving. And do not lose sight of the storytelling and the personal, the human side of politics. Because we've seen this all over the nation. We've seen this in our state capitol with all of these attacks. Humanizing the politics, storytelling in politics has been removed. And it's been a game of power and money. And we need to make sure the people most impacted by the issues, my dad, my mom, my sister, my neighbors, immigrant families, they're the ones that need to have a voice at the Capitol because that pink dome belongs to people like me and you. That pink dome belongs to us. And regarding young people, if elected, I'll be the youngest member of the Texas House. I'm 24 years old. And to make sure that young people are the future. Young people have a bigger voice at the Capitol because we have the experiences. How many of y'all grew up in a generation where you're doing active school shooter drills in schools? How many of y'all have been practicing and hiding under, hiding under tables to make sure drills. We used to do fire drills and things like that. Now it's active shooter trainings. We're living in a generation where we don't know what our future looks like. We don't know if we're going to have kids. We don't know if we're going to be married. We don't know what our climate future is going to look like. I worked on a lot of climate bills this past session addressing our power grid failure in 2021 where over 200 people died because our policymakers did not act when they were supposed to act. Again, pure disregard for human lives. And so we need to make sure those impacted most by the issue have a platform to make their voices heard and to be the ones that are writing the stories, that are writing the narratives, and that are writing the laws that are in turn going to affect their neighbors and society that they grew up in. So I'm really excited for this journey. I'm excited to bring fresh perspectives and new voice and new energy and a passion for service and genuine passion for my community to the Capitol, hopefully, in the next session. So thank you all so much for having me. If anyone has questions, I can take some questions. Yes?
Work with some kids that have to do shooter drills at school. We're now looking to participate, but our concern is that there's little to no security on campus, and there's little priority in gun control in Texas. What can you do to help, save our children and save students and allow us to have a better and more equal education?
Absolutely. So in terms of security on campus, in terms of having more armed people on campus, I don't necessarily agree with that. Just because I think that we've normalized that. We've normalized seeing people that are armed in schools in front of our children to protect them, which I understand. But we need to make sure we have common sense gun reform laws. We need to make sure, when I was in Representative Rafael Enchi's office, we filed over 40 gun control bills, and none of them passed. Not a single one has passed. And again, disregard for human lives, because we've seen thousands of children die across the nation, right? Because of lack of gun control bills. And how many has passed? How many bills have passed? So we need to make sure we're prioritizing lives, we're humanizing policies, prioritizing human lives, prioritizing our children and our neighbor when we're creating these policies. Because I will tell you this, if this was personal to a lot of the Republican lawmakers, if the story of living through a shooting, if the story of losing your child, losing your mother, losing your father to a shooter was personal, we will get a gun bill passed in the next 24 hours, and I will assure you that. Yes, ma'am.
I know the seat just opened up, so you're new to this, and it's amazing to see somebody under truly is. From a practical standpoint, one of the biggest issues in why we're losing elections is getting the youth out to vote. Do you have any specifics yet of how you're going to address that?
Yes, so let me start off by saying how we're a generation, I'm Gen Z, we're a generation that grew up in unprecedented challenges and social turbulence. Again, we're seeing active shooters everywhere, people being killed. We're seeing a lot of these social movements, and we're seeing little to no action by our policymakers. And so we need to make sure that we are, and when we're messaging, when we're communicating, we're messaging issues that are most important to the youth. We need to make sure that we're involving them in the decision-making process. If our state capital is not representative of the people, then youth are not getting as involved. And so we need to make sure when we're working with, so for instance for this campaign, we're trying to get youth to get registered to vote. Me being Gen Z, me being young, I'm trying to make sure that I'm paving the way for the next generation of leaders to see that it is possible for them to have a seat at the table. And even being a first-time candidate and being this young, I will tell you, I've faced many challenges in my campaign just so far. I'm not individually wealthy, I don't come from a wealthy family, I don't have financial support from my parents. And Texas does not make it easy for people to run for office at all. And so we need to make sure we're giving the platform to young people, and we're allowing them in spaces and allowing them in rooms where they can make decisions and they can have influence. And I think we're doing that. I think we're doing that slowly in the state. And again, with Avery Bishop running, she's also Gen Z, me running for office, and we have a lot of young candidates running for state and federal offices this year. We're paving the way for the next generation of leaders to have a seat at that table and know that they have the power, know that they can make decisions and they can take over and change the future that has been set for them.
Hi, so as a next generation and a first generation, so as a next generation and a first generation college student, I'm interested in your approach to student loan debt.
I'm sorry, say that again. Say the last part.
Student loan debt.
Yes.
As someone who comes from a financial background that who can barely afford basic necessities and then have to sacrifice, like being faced with the decision either work or get an education for a better future.
Absolutely, and I can relate to that. My parents did not pay for my education. I did not have a single contribution from my family because they simply could not. Again, like I mentioned earlier, my family came to the United States in search of better educational opportunities to make sure that I have the future that they dreamed of. And so you can tell the disappointment in coming and getting that education but being in debt. And we're a generation that paying off debt is no longer realistic. Paying off our debt, being debt-free, buying a home, is no longer realistic for this generation. And so we need to make sure, again, we're setting up the future of this country. We're setting up the youth of this country for success. And so student debt forgiveness is a big part of it. And so anything that I can help to influence in that, I'm on board.
Hi. So I'm still in high school and I'm not even like old enough to vote. But I was wondering, how did you get started? How can a young person get involved even when they have no experience? Because I'm really passionate about environmental issues and I know that I really want to get into the policies of that. And so I'm just like, how do I start? Because I have been volunteering like in like little organizations, but I still have no idea how to get into like policy.
Yeah. So when I went to college, I was not at a voting age when I first started college, and that was the 2016 presidential election. And I remember living in Abilene, Texas at that time. It was a mess, y'all. It was a mess, and I witnessed my neighbors and my identities being weaponized, and I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't vote. And same thing in 2021, the murder of George Floyd. All those instances combined with what I witnessed growing up and the hardships that my parents went through as an immigrant, those are stories, like I said earlier, that I hold near and dear to my heart. And so the first piece of advice that I would give you to get involved is make sure you have your story of why. Because power and fame and getting at the highest seat of the state cannot be the reasons why you want to get involved. You have to keep the stories of service and being and uplifting your community as in the middle. And in terms of logical things, start mobilizing. You're in the right place right now. Start mobilizing voters. You might not be able to vote, but tell your family, tell your friends to vote, and get involved in internships, paid internships. Get involved in internship in different offices, and make sure that again you're holding on to the whys of your running. Because I think that we need more people that have good reasons and that want to amplify the voices of the communities in places where decisions are made. Because we have too many people that are wanting to get wealthy or that are motivated by money and wealth and power in office. We do not need one more person at all. So make sure that you have your whys. Make sure that you're reaching out to as many people as possible, learning their stories, learning what matters most to your community, and starting on the ground. Thank you all.
I just want to give a quick shout out to our new LULAC 102 members from Irma Rangel High School. If y'all can please stand up. This is a great first step to get involved in getting involved in organizations like LULAC, who champions different issues. And I recently saw a poll yesterday that was sent out to all our LULAC members. And if you haven't answered it, go ahead and answer that poll. But more than 70% of our LULAC members vote. And when they did a poll of the young adults, which is what I'm the VP for, more than 80% of our LULAC young adults vote. And I thought that was amazing to see. So next breakfast, we have this breakfast every first Saturday of the month. So next breakfast, I hope that you bring more of your friends, more of your parents, your colleagues, because even if you cannot vote, you can take someone to the voting station. And I'm a DACA recipient and I cannot myself vote, but I make sure that in my voice, there's 5 votes at the poll. And that's one way that you can definitely get involved. Our next speaker, my campaign. Get involved in campaigns. That's also a great way to volunteer. Different people that you resonate with in your district, voting, knocking on doors, passing out flyers. There's so many ways to volunteer. Reach out to any of the people that you've heard from today if you want to volunteer. That's also a great way. But this is a great first step for you guys. Well, our next speaker is also a young woman running for office. I promise I didn't pick all these young women, okay?
I did that category, so.
You're not running for office, so no. But Avery Bishop is running for House District 112. Avery Bishop is a native Texan lawyer. She recently graduated from SMU Law School and an international nonprofit director. Avery made history when she became the very first Asian American woman to win the title of Miss Texas. During her year of service, she traveled over 70,000 miles and taught more than 100,000 students the importance of diversity and inclusion and fought for reproductive justice. With a combined following of more than 1 million followers, Avery leverages her social media platforms to inspire the next generation of leaders. Avery is a proud Democratic candidate for the Texas House of Representatives District 102. And I am proud to say that I actually do follow her on TikTok. So let's give a warm welcome to Avery.
Muchas gracias por invitarme hoy. Mi español no es perfecto, pero tomé 3 años clases en la universidad. Quiero practicar más mi español para poder conversar. Mi nombre es Avery Bishop, and I'm running for Texas House District 112, North Dallas, Richardson, in the Garland area. I was born and raised in a small town north of here, McKinney. I was a recent law school graduate, first in my family to graduate from college and from graduate school. And I was the first Asian American woman to win the title of Miss Texas in the 85-year history of the organization. And before I tell you why I'm running and how I'm going to win the race, I wanted to do an activity that I did as Miss Texas traveling across the state. So I need you guys to act as the most enthusiastic 3rd graders on the face of the planet and raise your hand during the game. What you do is you simply raise your hand if you agree with what I say, and if you don't agree with what I say, you keep your hands down, okay? So if you like what I say, it's a hand up. If you don't like what I say or agree with what I say, it's a hand down. We'll start off with something super simple. Hands up if Texas is going to win today. Yeah, exactly. Hands down. Hands up if you speak multiple languages. Hands down. Hands up if you were the first in your family to graduate from college. Hands down. Very proud of you. Hands up if your parents worked multiple jobs growing up. Hands down. Hands up if your favorite time of the day is breakfast. It's mine. Hands down. Hands up if you think Dallas is a fantastic city. It's better than Austin or Houston, but don't tell anybody that. So let's talk about why we did that really short activity. So in the context of a classroom or when I'm teaching kids, I'm usually in front of a larger group, maybe 500 to 600 students. And it's usually talking about Disney princesses or their favorite superhero. But obviously because we're a little bit older and a little bit more mature, we talk about policy issues or the context and background of our families. When you raise your hand, you see that people have similarities and things that you have in common. When you see people with their hands down, you have differences, right? And Senator Johnson earlier talked about our differences and the challenges people bring in the Capitol. And our differences are what makes us strong. Our differences are what our foundation here in the state of Texas relies on. I'm running for office because I grew up in Texas not feeling like I was at home. My parents worked multiple jobs. I was the only Asian American facing student in my school district for almost a decade. And I didn't have mentors or people that I could ask questions about when I looked at myself in the mirror and felt that I didn't look like what a true Texan should look like. And as Miss Texas, and as I went through law school, and as I advocated for reproductive justice and managed my nonprofit, my sole mission was to teach people that there's no specific way or language or conversation or background you need to have in order to be a Texan. So I decided to run for office because honestly I'm sick and tired of waiting. I knew I wanted to run for office in 2016 when I was 19 years old. When I grew up in my small town, my father, who's a 4th generation Texan, was a school bus driver. Never went to college. We were experiencing severe poverty and housing insecurity. But he wanted to run for office to show that normal people could run. He didn't win, but that's okay. I was 16 and I got to see my dad, who talks like this, who wore overalls through a neighborhood and knocked on doors, and I got to see how he was able to communicate with people and show that we need more normal people to run for office. People who are young, people who don't have money, people who are in student debt, like myself. And it's time for the Capitol to have many different voices at the table. But there are challenges, not only trying to pass legislation that supports and provides resources to diverse communities in the Capitol, but there are barriers for people to run. And there are barriers because they are embedded in the history of our politics across Texas and across the nation. The reason why there's no 24-year-old or 25-year-old in the Capitol is because that's what they want. They don't want people like me. They don't want people like my colleague who's also running for office to have a seat at the table because they know we're going to ask for what we need. My generation, and all of your generation, of course, experience the decisions that are made in the Capitol long after these politicians are no longer in office. I will have to control and organize and plan whether or not I even want to have children in the next decade because either our climate change isn't being addressed, our student loans aren't being addressed, the cost of property is not being acknowledged. And so all of these decisions that are made without listening to our communities are being made, we're being left behind. So I said no more. I don't care if I'm not rich. I don't care if I don't have an established career. I don't care if I, haven't started a family yet. If I have enough time, it's time to run for office because we need more options on the table. Here is what I'm going to advocate for. And of course, if you are in District 112, I'd love to meet with you and ask about some of the issues that you are very passionate about. But I want to focus on safe and equitable public school education. I went to public school all 12 years when I grew up in Texas, and I am the person that I am today because of my public school teachers, because of the public school staff, because of the public school opportunities, and the voucher vote that they're going to take on Monday is giving up on an institution that emancipated millions of minds across the history of our nation in Texas. Public school is the foundation for our students to have a prosperous life, and we're giving up on them, we're giving up on our teachers, we're giving up on an institution that is meant to be the last standing institution that we trust. It's a sorry excuse to not reinvest funding into increasing teacher pay and the basic allotment spent on individual students. That's all we have to do, but they're too lazy to do it. That's one of the policies I'm running on. Number 2, accessible healthcare, including mental health resources, reproductive justice, and healthcare for veterans like my brother who just finished serving in the military. Healthcare is an equitable human right, and nobody should be standing in line waiting for it like my mother did when she had me at 19 years old here in Texas and had no insurance. And the last policy I'm running on is diversity and inclusion, right? Making sure that your community, my community, all of our generations are being heard, because when we say y'all, it needs to mean all of us, not just a certain community being prioritized over another community. It means everyone in this room. It means everyone outside of this building. It means all of the people working in public school systems, right? Those are the 3 policies I'm running on. And at the end of the day, the intention is to win. We will win 112. We've been fighting to flip it for a decade, and this is the year we do it. But it comes down to money, unfortunately. And it goes back to the conversation we had earlier about humanizing politics. We need to make it not about politics and money, but politics and people. Because politics are meant to serve the communities we come from. And we're not being served with the people in office don't look like us, don't come from the background that we have, and get to sit in a position of power where they are so far removed from what's happening on the ground in our communities. So my name is Avery Bishop. I'm running for Texas House District 112, seeking to make history not only as the first Asian American Miss Texas, but the first Filipino elected to the Texas House. And I hope you'll join me, and even if you're not in the district, I encourage you to vote. If you can't vote, encourage a couple of friends to vote. Make sure people are registered to vote, because we need you. Texas needs you if we want to ensure that democracy works in the way that it's intended to. When people in the Capitol make decisions and reflect the communities that they serve, So people who look like us, who come from the same communities like us. And we're going to have a more prosperous and colorful space that we live in here in Texas. So thank you for having me. I can open it up to some questions you have. Thank you. Yes. Hi.
How do you plan to diversify Texas, especially in the school system? What can you help us to do to make it less marginalized, going into a school that we don't look like it?
Yeah. So my initiative is Miss Texas address that specific need. I served for 12 months this past year, going into almost 250 public school systems, providing diversity and inclusion workshops, resources, and curriculum to staff. So the little activity that we did earlier is just one of many that I created to teach students the importance of being kind to one another, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what they look like. The unfortunate reality is that at the end of my year of service, actually it was mid-year when I was serving, Governor Abbott passed SB 17, which demolished and outlawed diversity and inclusion programs in colleges and universities. So one of the first things I would do when elected is fight back against that bill and propose new legislation that would ensure the protection of programs